Welcome everyone to this week's Tim Talk. My name is Tim Cox, and we are so happy that you decided to take a few minutes out of your day to join us as we hopefully get better together. So that being said, I want to take a minute to introduce our guest today, who is, in my opinion, one of the, quite frankly, the pillars in the automotive space. You know, our logo, or our thing that we always say is no one's smarter than everyone. And there's certain people in the space that really stand out. Though high character, very bright, and Steve Greenfield checks all those boxes. And, you know, I really wanted to get him on Tim Talks because Steve, who, by the way, was the head of product for Cox for many years, worked side by side with another great pillar in our space, Chip Perry, and then at TrueCar as well. Steve is the president and CEO of Automotive Ventures. And, you know, I thought, you know, we've had, you know, this is our 9th Tim Talk, and I thought it would be very beneficial to have an agnostic view as Steve does, because he sees everything going on. He sees a lot of things going on with the OEMs. He sees a lot of things going on with big dealer groups. And I thought for us little guys here at Tim Talks, and then obviously all our partners around the country, we really wanted to just pick his brain a little bit. So I know that's kind of a long introduction, but Steve, we're so humbled that you are here with us just to spend a few minutes, and welcome to Tim Talks.
Super excited to be here. Thanks for having me, Tim.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Steve, let's just kick it off. I know we're going to have a couple poll questions. You know, look, I'm excited, and I know you just posted an article about as far as total OEM cars, sold cars being down, and I want to unpack that a little bit. But I have to tell you that I'm getting a lot of good news. I mean, I'm getting a lot of good news from, I talked to a 50-store dealer group 2 days ago, or right before the weekend, I think it was Thursday or Friday, that said, look, Tim, we're tracking from the 1st to the 17th of May. We're actually 103% of where we were last year. Another group, a Toyota store in Alabama, you know, Sarah Toyota was 118% up month, you know, year over year, the same month. So I'm seeing a lot of good news. And as dealers and dealer groups are really looking at their budgets right now, you know, what are you hearing? And actually, let's just address our first poll question. What's the most important thing to you guys right now listening? Reducing expenses or increasing revenue? So if you would take the time to answer that, and we'll get that back after we hear Steve's initial thoughts. Steve?
Yeah, Tim, I mean, like you, I get to talk to a lot of dealers and a lot of vendors across the country, and largely hearing the same thing. I think that I would kind of sum it up as being cautiously optimistic right now.
Right.
I think everybody was bracing for, you know, really, really tough times. And I think everyone's a little curious as to like actually who's getting out of their homes and buying vehicles right now. But, you know, whether it's the service lanes that seem to be fairly full, or vehicle sales, both on the new and used side, that are coming back stronger than people had expected, frankly. Yeah, you hear about a few dealers that are actually up year over year, which is shocking to me. But I think in certain markets that haven't really been closed down, like I think of the Florida market, for example, dealers have been selling all along. And I think right now the consumers are happy to get back out. You know, as you've seen very publicly, all the states are opening up. And consumers that did have pent-up interest know that, you know, now's a good time for me to seize on some of these incentives that are out there, and or get out before used car values rebound. So I think the flip side that I'm hearing is, you know, I've spoken with a number of dealers in the last week and a half that are concerned about running out of new cars because, you know, as you've seen very publicly, most of the plants were closed down during the month of April, and only have come to half capacity at best so far. So, you know, on the hotter vehicles, which are like the SUVs and the pickup trucks, I think we may very well see by midsummer dealers actually running out of cars. And, you know, I've heard anecdotally that some dealers are more heavily back in the auction lanes to stock up on those types of segments because they anticipate that they're going to be out of new, and their only option is to flip consumers into used vehicles.
Which is, and you know, let's talk about that for a second. And by the way, look at the poll question, Steve. 100% of people said that increasing revenue is more important than reducing expenses. I would probably argue a couple months ago that was probably a little different.
I agree.
But now, personally, and I'm going to public service announcement. I am presently shopping for a late model Jeep for my son, and I had. I'm not going to mention the names. But business obviously is good because I physically walked into 3 dealerships that were not our dealerships, but 3 dealerships yesterday and had people were everywhere, but I absolutely had a horrific experience. We can talk about that. In fact, we'll talk about that in another Tim Talk. But my dealer friends out there, if you do have a very nice late model 4-door Jeep, if you would please contact me at tim@carnow.com so I can get my kids safely back to Arizona State. There's a little service bulletin.
And make sure he pays all the price. He's willing to pay a little extra.
Pay all the money. I'll pay $5,000 out of book, whatever it takes. Good stuff. So what are some things that you're seeing? And maybe it's with the big publics, or maybe it's just, maybe a mid-sized dealer group. What are some things that you're seeing that you're having these conversations too, that maybe we can pick up on that really stood out to you over the last, several months?
Yeah, so I think that, as we said, it all starts with the consumer, right? So we need healthy consumers that are confident that they're going to have a job, and confident that they want to get out there, and the next 6 to 9 months are going to be strong economically. And right now, I think consumers are cautious, right? So I think that we can all agree that no matter how and when we come out of this thing strongly, which I think will happen, and look, we're seeing it, a leading indicator seems to be car sales, which is great for the dealers out there, that unemployment's going to be higher. I think that that's going to be from a few things, right? One is, I think some of the companies will go out of business. We've seen very publicly retailers like JCPenney, for example, a number of retailers, and I expect more of them will be going through bankruptcy. So just in general, the population will get negatively affected. And you've got then restaurants, some of which aren't going to survive. So I think that, and then you've got companies, a lot of corporations, like Tim, you might be able to comment on this, but this work from home thing in a lot of cases has worked out okay. And I think that, I would suspect that over the next year, we see maybe a softness. I'm not an expert in this area, but in commercial real estate, because I think some of these companies that used to have this philosophy around having, their employees all in one big office building might say, you know what, it's more cost effective. And my employees are just as productive. And frankly, maybe they don't like the commute. We see less traffic on the road, and we see the bad thing that might be fewer miles incurred on vehicles, so less replacement of vehicles. But we may see, as a result, anybody who's involved in the commercial real estate market might also be impacted negatively. So I think we can all agree that coming out of this year, likely unemployment rates are going to be higher than they were recently, which was like at all-time lows, which means there'll be fewer people probably in the market. And I think that shows, whether you look at JD Power or ALG or any of these folks that forecast new vehicle sales and used vehicle sales, SAR is going to be down, right? So vehicle sales are going to be down because we're going to have consumers that are either more
million, right?
unemployed.
It was at 16.5 million going into this year. And I've been on a couple of JD Power calls, and I think they went down to 13. Where is it presently now? Do you know? Because I know it's gone back up.
Yeah, I think it's floating between 12 to 14 from the number that I've seen. But I think the problem is nobody can really call the ball because no one knows how quickly we're going to come out of this thing.
Yeah, we have a poll question on here. A year from now, and this is very interesting, and I would like to comment on this, but a year from now, will you be back full pre-COVID employment levels? And then by the end of the year, will you be back to selling the same number of vehicles? I think number 2 is pretty easy. But fill out those poll questions and we'll get that data back. And then talking about commercial real estate, as you see us sitting here in our Atlanta office, where we were just talking about before we came live, I think, look, in all things, I'm one of those, I have to look at things. I can't even, we talked about it before. I can't even watch the news. I don't care what network it is. Can't watch it. It's all negative to me. It's, you're bad. Everybody hates it. I can't do it. I have to have positive into my brain all the time. And the positive is we're seeing that we took more dealers live last month than any other month in the history of our company. And everybody worked from home. Number 1. Number 2, it's a lot less wear and tear on automobiles. Number 3, for a company, even our size, and we're obviously not a huge company, but expenses, travel expenses, we're we're not out, you know, flying all over the place. And look, my job, I'm going to have to still do some of that stuff, but we're learning how to lean up. And how does this affect the local dealer that's listening to our show right now? Is very simple. You know, let me just, I love telling stories, and stories prove a point. We were in the heart, and if you've listened to Tim Talks, you've heard this, but we were in the heart of COVID, and a Hyundai dealer in upstate New York, very simply sent a hashtag to Michelle Sawyer, who's one of our amazing sales managers. And the hashtag simply said, hashtag, we need you. And he basically, obviously, got a response to Michelle. Michelle called him and said, hey, which the story was so beautiful, I had to call because I told our people in the middle of all this, listen, guys, yes, we're a software company, but right now we are positioned not to sell software, but to sell hope. And quite frankly, Steve, you and I have talked, have deep conversations before. It almost became spiritual that we could actually help people now. But I'm getting to the point, as I talked to this dealer, he was saying hashtag, we need you. They weren't even open, and he took 2 deposits online using our tool. And look, there's a lot of great tools out there, but using our tool. But when I called him, this is what he said. He said, you know, I have been kicking this can of digital retailing for a long time. Look, I personally am an old school car guy, right? But most of us are. And based on the experience that I had personally this week, most dealerships still are. So he said, look, but what I've understand, and it was clear to me last night when I watched a movie with my family, and it was a movie that was out in the movie theaters. The movie theater shut down. On Demand charged me $20 for it, and I watched the movie. And as I sat there, I was like, man, I don't think I'll ever go back. This is great. It's a brand new released movie. Granted, things are going to change in the movie industry. But then he said, you know, the things that I'm learning using your tools now, he said, number one, I'm training and streamlining my process. I'm streamlining the process in my store. I've created a brand. I'm streamlining my process. And I'm also training my customers. I don't think they're not ever going to want to go back. So they're streamlining. He's talking about even holding, you know, a couple $100 more gross on the average deals coming through. So I think that's what collectively the people that are putting their heads together, figuring this out, coming out of this as an industry, we're understanding, and it's not just about calculators, and we can talk about that. It's about conversations, but how you touch that customer is going to make a big difference. And I think the dealers that get this are going to be way ahead of the game, way ahead of the game.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that sometime probably in mid-March, the dealers that were reluctant to buy into digital retailing tools woke up and said, ooh, I see this freight train coming. I got to get on board. Right. Yeah. So it's like, you know, good for them. I think that, you know, now I think pretty much every dealer has some way of being able to accommodate kind of an online shopper and do driveway delivery. But, you know, for those that were kind of holding out, I think this is the day of awakening. And I think, you know, Tim, personally between you and me, I think consumers have a pretty short memory. We all have pretty short memories. I think consumers are going to actually love to do what you did this weekend and go into stores, kick the tires, test drive, et cetera. But it doesn't mean that they're not going to want to start their deal online and figure out, you know, which dealers are more open to sharing information online ahead of time, so I can decide which dealer I'm going to go walk into, right? So I think all of that is going to play out, and I think that prompt is good. And you know, the flip side of it, you talk about the consumer, but I can tell you, talking to a lot of dealers, I mean, a lot of dealers have been shocked that come mid-March, you know, now a month ago, a little bit over a month ago, the auctions effectively closed, right? So not that there was a lot of volume going through the auctions, but you couldn't, if you wanted to today, go to a physical auction and stand in the lanes because they're not open. So right. If you listen to the ADESA earnings call 2 weeks ago, and you know, the CEO of Cox Automotive was on Automotive News last week, both of them are taking the opportunity to reevaluate their total cost structure and see if this is going to be a pivot point for them to say, hey, can we help dealers more cost effectively bid remotely on cars going forward? And maybe they won't have to open up anytime soon to physical. So I think that, you know, we'll see a shift here. This will be an inflection point, both around how dealers offer their services and focus, frankly, more on the customer experience, but also, you know, all the vendors out there are going to think, how do we make dealers' lives easier and make them more efficient by offering things more digitally to dealers?
And that's a great point. And I mean, as far as the auction, look, I was a pre-owned guy for most of my career, and companies. I don't want to really talk about companies, but we got to mention, what ACV Auctions has done, making it easy. But there's still something about, you can't. Here's the old thing. I appreciate that, but there's still something. Just like people are going into the dealership, you still can't smell if a car. You can't. In a CR. A CR at Manheim, a condition, by the way, when a car goes through the auction, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know, it's given a CR report, anywhere from, 1 to 5 being perfect. And depending on whoever is giving that condition report determines a 2.5 in Atlanta could be a 3.5 in Orlando. And unless you're at the auction, you can't smell if that car has been smoked in. You can't see certain things. So I really believe, just like salespeople are never going away, I think the type of salesperson is going to change a little bit. I think that need to be able to at least touch, smell, feel those automobiles. And you brought up an interesting point. We were scared to death, and I want to get because you have more talks in this area than I do. People were scared to death of the pre-owned market going, a couple months ago, because incentives were so high, demand, nobody knew what was going on. And I kept hearing, I've got, $150,000 of water on my lot right now. But then in the same breath, a couple weeks later, people were like, I had the best pre-owned month I've ever had. Have you heard that? Can you explain what you're hearing around the country, just to educate our listeners on that line?
Well, I think it's the same thing you just mentioned. I think that demand has come back quicker than anybody expected, right? So whereas, auction values took a big dump, right? I mean, there was nothing selling the auction lanes. I understand, talking to auction executives, there are more cars parked at the auctions right now than there ever have been in the history of the auctions. Wow. So if you go down to Atlanta Motor Speedway, for example, I mean, that whole area is all parked with rental cars right now because the auctions can't take the rental cars in. I mean,
are they okay, we'll get to that in a second. And I want to talk about Hertz.
Sure. I mean, in that case, my understanding, actually, they're mostly enterprise cars. But yeah, I mean, Hertz is another issue that we can talk about, absolutely, and what that's going to do. But I think what happened was, because things slowed down and everybody was so fearful, dealers weren't buying. The sellers were still trying to get the cars sold, but nobody was buying at the auction level. Now, I think we're seeing the converse, right? So volumes are coming back. And dealers in many cases are anticipating more consumer demand. And what's happening is the prices are coming back up quickly, right? So I think that what was 2 weeks ago, the general temperature is quite different now 2 weeks later, as people are starting to feel much more confident. But backed on data, I mean, we're seeing actually more people like yourself out there looking for cars, whereas 2 weeks ago, you might have said, you know what, I'm gonna sit on the fence because I can just wait for a couple of weeks. And I think it's going to be compounded, talking about new car incentives, when the OEMs here in a few weeks realize that dealers are running out or running short on new cars, they're going to back off the incentive spigot. Now, that may be different at the end of the year, depending on how things play out. But if there aren't enough new cars to satisfy demand, absolutely, dealers are going to be trying to CPO more cars, kind of sell you a used Jeep instead of a new Jeep. And I think that the OEMs are going to sit back and say, why are we putting big incentives on cars where we don't even have enough inventory as it is?
And I want to be careful here. I never want to look, there's a lot of people, and my heart goes, there's a lot of people that are suffering right now. A lot of people have been furloughed, so I don't want to ever downplay, and I'm not. I am seeing what I think a little bit of this big push in the space. I saw a meme on Facebook, and it said, gas, $0. There was a few other, hotel bills, $0. It was like blah, 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 and grocery bills, $1,623. So, I mean, I think
sounds like my house.
Have experienced that, but I think people, for the most part, that obviously are saving. Yes, there's a lot of junk going on right now, but people are saving a lot of money too, because they're not, we're not out there. I mean, my daughter and my kids are home from college because of the situation. And guess what? Daddy's credit card's not going up. It's because Daddy buys groceries now. So I mean, in all seriousness, I mean, we're saving money, and I think that's happening over the next last few months. And that, coupled with the incentives from the OEMs, is very interesting. We mentioned Hertz, and look, I don't care if it's a competitor. I never want to see anything bad happen to any company. True capitalism, but what do you see with what's going on with Hertz? Do you see that affecting, Hertz rental car company, declared for bankruptcy this past week? How do you see that huge influx of cars? Are they taking those to the market, or what do you see, or what have you heard that's going to happen there?
Yeah, so Hertz is kind of like a symptom of a sick patient, right? So I would take a step back and say, what's actually going on? Well, guys like you, who probably spent most of his time on a plane, when's the last time you were on a plane?
March, I was at the Germain Group, March 12th.
Okay, good. But you probably did fly a couple times a week typically, right?
3 times a week.
Okay, good. And in cities, you might Uber, but you might also pick up a rental car. Well, I can tell you, I mean, go to any airport right now and look at the rental car lots. All of them are just full of vehicles, right? Never mind Atlanta Motor Speedway and the auctions, because no one's renting cars, because their bread and butter are people like you who are business travelers who travel frequently. You probably have a points program with a bunch of different rental car companies, and you had loyalty to them, and you would rent very regularly. And business travelers aren't flying. Airlines, have had these huge extensions from the U.S. government to keep them afloat. And then, downstream from that, because business travelers aren't traveling, you got, the airports aren't busy, and, rental car companies aren't renting. So just because Hertz, to your point, had, this huge amount, like $19 billion in debt they couldn't service, they were first to go. All the rental car companies are really suffering right now, right? So I think that perspective, let's not call out Hertz. Hertz just is the first victim, perhaps, right? But what's going to happen here is the Hertz creditors now, they're going through bankruptcy. They're going to have to liquidate a big chunk of those vehicles and try to figure out how quickly they're willing to liquidate those and depress the market, versus if they're going to slowly let it bleed and try to keep prices strong. And part of that will be how strong the used car market is. This may play out well, riffing off of what we just sort of said, if new car stores can't get new car inventory, but want good CPO-able vehicles, they may very well turn to buying those cars either upstream or at the physical auctions, certifying them, and offering them as a substitute to new cars, right? So the nice thing about auctions is they can absorb a lot of cars very, very efficiently without depressing vehicle prices very much. But when you've got a seller like Hertz, if they do decide for whatever reason, it would be insanity, but to liquidate all those cars at once, we will see a dip. But for, I think, an enterprising dealer that can buy on the dips, if they've got a strong local market, you may see dealers make a killing off those cars if they can buy them at a discount.
I remember a friend of mine, and his name's Adam Merlin. I can remember he's done really well. He's an independent dealer here in Atlanta. He deals in highline, ultra highline Ferraris and so on. And so, but before that, he ran a store, and I can remember the big gas crunch. And I can't remember if it was 05, 06. I can't. But he was so smart that he went out and he bought every big SUV that he could because gas was so expensive. And they were not pennies on the dollar, but they were just dirt cheap. And he just stacked them up, as we say in Kentucky, stacked them up like cordwood in the back, right? And man, when gas dropped, he was a rock star because he was wise. And ladies and gentlemen, if your job is to buy cars, I would be searching. I would be out here on these websites. I would be looking at Hertz. I would be looking all over the place. And whatever your niche is, making sure that you get those right cars, because even if the market, as the market changes, I'm looking for a Wrangler for my son right now, and I'm even seeing some things change pretty quickly on vehicles that were priced one way and the other way, and now that are actually going back up. What are some innovative things that are happening? Are you seeing anything either at a big picture level or individual dealers? What are some innovating things that are happening? Is there one-offs or two-offs? And I know we didn't talk about this, but that you possibly could share.
Yeah, I'll say, you've been kind of in the vendor space and a recipient of a lot of vendor calls over the years, right? So I've always kind of thought that, if I'm a general manager or a general sales manager and someone's coming in, you better either help me generate more revenue or help me reduce my costs, right? Put into those two buckets. Now, generating revenue can be around increasing sales, but it can also be filling up my service lanes. Yeah. Or just, help me get more revenue PVR per unit I'm selling, right? So that will all work for me. On the cost focus, I'm actually interested in your survey because I think the results are quite different than what we would have seen like a month ago. if no one's really focused on cost? Because a month ago, that's the only thing that any dealer that I talk to want to talk about is like, how do I, decrease my vendor spend? How do I do, more with less? And how do I become more efficient? So I think those are the buckets really we're going to see innovation in right now. I think that the important thing for vendors right now is to focus on those things when they're talking to an owner, and make sure that you can very crisply identify the effectiveness and measure. The number of vendors that go into dealers, and dealers share with me their dashboards, and you can't make sense of like whether there's an ROI to my spend is crazy to me. So I think that, being very, very focused on either helping a dealership generate more revenue or cut costs, depending on, survey them, ask them through their needs analysis, and then focusing on metrics and ROI is where I think vendors will differentiate through this crisis.
I want to bring on something that happened to me yesterday. Look, we're a digital company, we're a software company, we're communication. I think we can't forget about the in-store experience. And by the way, I want to have a Tim talk on this. So all my, Sarah Fisher, I know you're out there. I haven't scrolled through the names. Several of you guys, I'm going through some names, Jim Grodi, all of you guys, I would encourage you to do this. Go walk onto where no one knows you. Maybe it's a few exits up, maybe it's 20 minutes down the road. Go onto a competitor's lot and shop for a car. One of the, as we land this plane, one of the most powerful studies that I have ever heard came from one of my heroes and your dear friend, Chip Perry at DMSC, I think it was 2 years ago. And he said, he basically defunct. They did their own study, and then I remember David Metter came with the same questions at Urban Science, and he basically defunct everything that all the digital gurus have been saying. People are going to shop 4 dealerships, they're going to go into 1.4, and then he unpacked it and said, wait a minute, if that's true, and there's a lot of people spewing that garbage, then why am I not closing at 70%?
Right.
And no one's ever actually done the math before. We're like, oh, wow, well, then I should be closing at 70%. And some dealers are, but no dealer is if they put all their customers in the CRM. That's a whole other Tim talk. But what he said that was so, and I want you to listen to this, please, listen close. Millennials, and you know this, every digital dealer, every driving sales, every NADA, everybody gets up and they talk about millennials. But millennials actually visited more dealerships. I believe it was almost 3 in some cases. It was 2.4 to 3 physical dealerships, millennials, before they bought a car. Do you remember that study I'm talking about?
I do.
And then he asked 2 other questions that I almost bring up in every. I know the data is 2 years old, but the car shoppers were asked, if you knew you were going to have a great experience versus a horrible experience, how much more would you pay? How much further would you drive? And I've been throwing these numbers out, and I've got Steve here to back me up here. People said they would pay $1,000 more, and that was 89% said they pay $1,000 more, and 58% said they pay $1,000 more, and 89% said that they would drive 30 minutes further if they knew they were going to have a great experience.
Yep.
So we need to talk about digital, but man, if we could just set the tone in our dealerships on how we receive our customers that are physically walking on our lots, we would change. And if you did that immediately, we would change everything. Because I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to go on a rant right now, but boy, do I have some stories to tell you about my experience shopping for my son's Jeep in the last couple days. Just absolutely unbelievable. So let's really dial in. As we always say, we want to give you some meat and potatoes that you can take home today and cook dinner. Let's look at, go out today and shop your competition. Act like you're buying a car. And what that's going to do is that's going to really fire you up like, oh my gosh, are we treating customers like this? and then you can take what you've learned there and then go back to your store and create that.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you know, interesting you say that, because, you know, one of the smartest people in the industry who was a mentor to me would always say, and continues to say, that, you know, price is only an issue in the absence of value. So it's like, you know, when people focus on price, it's because they're not seeing the value elsewhere. And that goes if you're buying a loaf of bread or a car. And I think that, you know, to your point, talk about a different talk in the future. I think it's worth looking at these dealers that embrace more of a consumer-centric value proposition, or are transparent and open. I'm willing to bet that they also sell more F&I products, because the actual process has a lot less friction. And when a consumer understands the benefits of insurance products and what it's going to do for them personally, they probably are more likely to raise their hand and buy. And your PVR might be actually higher on a transaction basis, and your profitability might be higher.
I won't mention the name, but he is listening right now, as I have to be politically correct. But there is a big dealer group who we're very close to in Cleveland, or not Cleveland, but Toledo. That is the epitome of that. They do everything the right way, and their F&I numbers, I've never seen F&I numbers like that, which I'm not going to share with you, but that is unequivocally correct. Yeah. So listen, anything else, Steve? Any closing remarks?
No, hey, I'm just really very happy that there's optimism. You know, it seems like maybe, you know, vehicles are going to be a leading indicator coming out of this thing, which is great. Let's keep our fingers crossed and keep the foot down on the accelerator. I hope that, you know, we don't have any supply shortages, because dealers don't need more issues to deal with. But, you know, if dealers are able to swap out, you know, new car buyers into used cars and make good profit on them, all the better. And hopefully here, you know, we exit the year with a very healthy segment and dealers are very healthy. There was speculation that this might cause a bunch of bankruptcies, and I haven't heard any of that yet. Right. So fingers crossed that we're all healthy, and everybody within the whole industry is healthy.
Absolutely. Hey, thank you, Steve. One thing that I do want to announce, we do have some big news. We've done digital marketing strategies conference, I think, for the past 5 years. It is going virtual this year. So we're excited about that. So all of the tickets are going to be virtual. We are going to give, it's still a ticket cost, and we are still going to be giving away a ticket to DMSC. One of my most favorite events. It is intimate in person. It's going to be even, I think, the deal when you go to a conference like this, even a smaller conference that's more intimate, you know, you can only go to 1 or 2 breakout sessions. This way, everything's going to be sent to you. In fact, Brian even told me that he's, you know, there's always a wine tasting after this. You know, he's even sending, I guess, a care package, and they may or may not have wine in there from the local vineyards there in Napa, and that could be coming to your house. And if you don't partake, then you can give that, I guess, to somebody else. But we are going to be giving away that. Please join us at DMSC. And listen, I can't thank you enough, Steve. Thank you for making us smarter. And listen, as always, no one is smarter than everyone. And we'll see you next week as we talk to Steve Russler, as a matter of fact. So just a little commercial. He's the only guy in the car business that's crazier than I am. And he's one of the partners, I believe, and VP of sales at DriveCentric. And that's a great CRM that's doing some cool things. And we're going to be talking about some creative ways to connect with your customers. Until we see you then, let's get better together. Have a great day.